Hello and welcome back to the Herbal Entrepreneur Conference. I'm Yolanda Joy, and today I am really thrilled to be able to introduce you to Nancy Phillips, who is the herbalist and the owner behind Heartsong Farm and Wellness Centre. Nancy, I am so thrilled to have you on today.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, well, it is such a pleasure to have you on, and I am really excited to dive into a little bit about what you do as an herbalist, and also like helping people figure out how to navigate their path as an herbalist in this session, and a little bit all of these topics. There's so much that you have done in your life as an herbalist, and personally, like I have been incredibly inspired by your work, and this conference, in fact, was inspired by your book, the Herbalist Way. But before we do get into all of that stuff, I think it would be great if you could give a bit of an introduction about you as an herbalist and kind of how Heartsong Farm came to be.
Okay. Yeah. Well, my husband and I bought our farm over 35 years ago. So we've lived here that long. And I always kind of think that I'm married to my husband, but also married to my land in a sense. So it's the idea of just like life, the farm's always evolving and our work's always evolving. And we were mostly market gardeners, vegetable gardeners in the beginning, and then it just evolved into I just had this huge passion for learning about medicinal herbs and was using them myself, and then just really wanted to broaden that perspective and be able to help others. And also from the very beginning, actually, we always felt we were really blessed to live in a really pretty peaceful place on the planet, and we wanted to share that. But so it all evolved over time. We've done different things. At one point in our lives, we were primarily making our living with medicinal herbs, growing them, and then we dispersed it with teaching, and I'd see clients as well. And my husband has an holistic apple orchard, organic apple orchard, and he actually wove a lot of the teachings from the herbs into his holistic practices with the apples. So he's actually learned a lot of cutting edge things that he shares with a lot of other people too through his work. So I think partly just looking at the way we look at the body and finding balance with the herbs also works in the ecosystem. So that's how things have kind of evolved. At this point, really probably throughout my herbalist career, I've always loved the aspect of teaching the most. There's growers, there's medicine makers, there's people that run an apothecary or retail shop. There's people that work more with the plants through maybe spiritual healing work, whatever. I think we all blend a little bit of all of that into our lives when we're an herbalist. But my favorite is really teaching, because I think that our current conventional healthcare system is not really a healthcare system. It's kind of a sick care system. And so years past, it was easy for me to see that that's not really a healthy it wasn't a healthy system, and I wanted to help sustain this old model of the village herbalist and this idea of a community herbalists, and that these are life skills that we lost somewhere along the way. So my favorite thing is to teach local people or any people anywhere just some of these life skills, how to go out into your garden, use the weeds as well as you would use the garden plants, and make medicine. And so that's probably what primarily I do see clients now, and I do it with a couple of different models just to see somebody once or twice. And I do a 6-month coaching with clients too, which I love the most, because you can really help people shift and make an impact. And then I run retreats and workshops and like 7-month programs. My current favorite is called the Ancient Wisdom for Modern Women, which is I weave a little bit of Ayurveda, herbal medicine, and yoga. Actually, we all really complement each other. And so it's a 7-month program where people really delve into that. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit in a nutshell. But,
Yeah, what a wonderful introduction. Like I really like looking at this because you're such a seasoned herbalist and you've followed so many different paths in different phases of your career as an herbalist, which I think a lot of us can relate to, like just trying out bits and pieces because we're creative and we want to try out the different parts. We want to grow, we want to make, we want to see people. But like that core belief of wanting to get out in the community and like kind of make a difference, like help the people in our community to really understand how herbs can help their kind of everyday life is, I think, something that most people listening to this can really relate to. And that's yeah, what your core work really has been about.
Yes, that teaching aspect is one of my favorites. But I think even when I see people one-to-one, it's really, I see myself as a teacher then too, just sharing what I know works for me, works for others, what I've seen other. And so that's kind of the framework that I use. That's more of an educator.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and that is also like each person has to figure out for them what is the best thing because everyone has their different strengths, and like it's fine to try a bit here and try a bit there and work out what is for you. But I know in this conference and also in your book, we talk about different pathways or different ways that people can take as an herbalist. Like they might be more interested in growing or making, selling, healing, or teaching, like those different pathways that people can take. For someone who has actually been there and tried out a few of these different ways, do you have any advice for someone who is trying to navigate this, like which direction to follow as an herbalist?
Yes, well, that I love that question. It's kind of near and dear to my heart, and really was the precept for us writing our book a while back called the Herbalist Way. The I felt because of my somehow blessing in life, I got connected and worked with Rosemary Gladstar and then became a close friend with her. And so because she is so much of a networker and so well known, I found out about all these different paths. And I thought, what if I had still stayed in the little town of Kansas where I grew up? I just wouldn't even known that all these things were happening or how to get in touch or how to learn. So that was our goal in our book, is to just try to, the book isn't so much about using herbs, but how to become an herbalist. But one of my favorite parts was to interview different herbalists around the country, and just some that work more as growers, some as work more as practitioners, some run retail stores, some really worked with just the spirit essence of the plants, and just to see that that's all of us are herbalists when we do all those things. It's hard to really do all of them. I think that we find our niche and really just need to listen to our heart and visualize like what do you see yourself doing and how do you want to be in the world? Is it working one-to-one with people? If you're making medicine, do you want to, how big do you want to be, and do you like production work? So you kind of just have to question yourself with those things and figure out what your niche is. I think sometimes we want to start out and be as experienced as our elders or somebody that we know that's doing a certain thing. It's like we want to instantaneously be a big oak tree when we have to start as a sapling, and just take it step by step and be patient with the journey. And then we usually find different aspects that really suit us well. And sometimes during our lives, like actually when my daughter was younger, she homeschooled with us. And so we really all three of us were on the farm almost every day, and we didn't make a lot of money. We were selling mostly dried herbs, where it was our big income. You don't always make unless you get bigger, you don't make a huge income from that. But it was really rich life because often we'd have 3 meals at home, and Gracie just grew up digging in the dirt and playing and so there was a certain richness from that, which is important. I guess as far as my advice for new people starting out is, I just don't think there's anything better than an apprenticeship or mentoring with somebody for a while, and then just finding out, if you want to be a medicine maker, then you go work or volunteer with somebody that's doing that. Or if you want to grow, I know our friends Matthias and Andrea Risen from Healing Spirits offer a class called Dirty Fingernails. I think you could probably, over that weekend, I think it's a 3 or 4 day workshop class, you could probably learn 3 years worth of information that if you did it trial and error by yourself, they're really just going to go into the deep aspects of growing and harvesting and making the business that way. So again, I was fortunate enough to just work and help Rosemary a lot, and she did a lot of the things that I like to do as far as teaching and leading programs and things. So that was really a good apprenticeship for me, just being her and working with her for years. So yeah, I think getting a mentor, doing an apprenticeship, really delving into things, and then you just kind of find your niche. And most of us have to do more than one. You know, I don't really think you'd be a very good oh, it's hard for me to say. It seems hard for me to not, and if you didn't do some growing and working with the live plants, you don't necessarily need to sell those things, but you need to get your hands in the soil and be with the plants, if you, even to be a good practitioner, in my opinion. So yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of
I've
choices.
heard that a lot as
That's
well.
what makes
Like,
it fun.
yeah, that whole journey from the ground to the person, like the more involved you can get, the better you get to know the actual plants. And that's what we're working with as herbalists. So like the more that we can get our hands in the dirt, the better it is. And like it's also grounding in ourselves as well. Like it's a good way to recharge if we're, you know, busy doing other stuff throughout the day, like having that time in the garden, whether that's, yeah, or whether it's actually gardening or foraging or just like dealing with the fresh plants, like that that energy and that time spent is really well spent, I think. And that's, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because it's an important part of the whole journey to work out, to build that connection with the plants and also with other people as well, like that mentor that you mentioned as well.
Yes, I think when I teach, um, you know, a lot of people come in, and I often have on the agenda to, you know, teach plant ID and to teach medicine making and you know, what constituents are going to work best and what solvent and blah, 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 and these things. But really what maybe one of the more subtle things, but the more powerful things is just getting people to reconnect with the earth and with the plants. And to me, it's also just reconnecting deeply with the divine within and without, and understanding that each person is their own healer, and the plants are there for us and we've evolved with them. And just really that connection with the earth and the elements is part of what I like to share. It just come kind of part and parcel with the other things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a really good point. Like it's just so important as herbalists that we are kind of continuously connected with the herbs, and then yeah, that the nature and earth as a whole, like that's all part of it. And it shows in the way you practice as well. Like the more the more connected you are, and no matter what pathway, that's important as well. Whether like even if you own an herbal shop that sells products, actually getting out there and like seeing how those herbs grow will give you that new understanding
Mhm.
of how they look in nature, or that and give you those clues as to how they can be used, or how they might be useful in practice as well. Like it's every step of the way, it's important.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah. So like moving a step forward now, if we go into like how to actually, like, we have this passion for plants and we want to be an herbalist, but like enjoying working with plants and actually being able to work as an herbalist and have a sustainable business is a very different thing. So like when you are in the game to, you know, make a living as an herbalist, what do you think is I mean, it might be different for different people obviously, but is there a better way to go about it? Should people focus on one area? Is it better to diversify and focus on lots of different things? Or like, what would be your advice as far as actually making a living as an herbalist?
I think it just depends too, again, what you really want to do. If if you want to be a practitioner, it's a little different than if you really want to be basically a farmer. And again, they overlap and both is important, but I mean, if you live in a city and you want to see people in your home or an office, it's a little different than if you have a farm and you want to own land and really grow and sell them. So I guess it's a difference. We're farmers first, and then we work with the land, and then we teach what we know from that. That was like the first thing. And in the beginning, to be honest, we had a mortgage, and our herbal work and gardening work didn't pay a mortgage. So usually in the beginning, there was either myself or Michael were working off the farm. He did carpentry sometimes, and then I taught school sometimes because we needed that extra income to help whittle it down a ways. And then we were able, like I said, at a certain point where we were both home full time. There's other aspects, like going to conferences and things. Those are very educational, as well as if you're an herbalist, then, if you teach or you write articles or, books, that helps get the word out. Blogs these days, whatever, things like that. So I think it's just finding what your niche is and then just putting your heart and soul into it. And you may have to do it part-time in the beginning until you build up, if you're a practitioner, maybe you have another job for a little while and then you build up your reputation. But I've known some people that just do the opposite, they completely just do it so full time. So anyway.
It does depend on your personal situation when you get started as well, or whether you have that like financial cushion or if you don't. And in fact, I think a lot of herbalists do start doing it on the side and like allow their herbal business to grow organically without as much stress because they have another job at the same time, which is like how I think is probably the easiest way to go about it if you don't have that cushion cash at the beginning, like just to have that so that you can do it in a fun way rather than like stressful way, so that you have that part-time income and you can follow your passion. And then if you are passionate about it and really do strive to do good work as an herbalist, then it's going to grow, and it might take time. It might take like 5-10 years to really start to flourish. But with time, if you consistently put in that effort and continue to like get better at what you do, it's going to have results eventually. And so like just knowing that in your mind is the most important thing sometimes. Yeah.
And there are some excellent schools out there now that really do, there's a lot more training and education than when I was just starting out. I mean, there are, schools with 3-year programs, 4-year programs that part of it they're going to weave in as a business segment as well. So, I mean, that's definitely a route that people can take, is, just to go to one of the there's some really good programs now. And if you're a farmer and you really want to just grow herbs, and I always think you find which herbs you really have an affinity for and what grows well on your land, and then you focus on that. And then it's always nice to have a variety so that you can offer more than that, but you really focus on the ones that you have an affinity for. The things that often sell the best are the things that are tonics that people use a lot every day, not just when they're out of balance. So, it's the things like nettles and oats and that people want, all year long, they want a big amount of. So I guess there's a little sidebar of growing milky oats, things like that people can use a lot of. And
yeah, that's a really good point. You have to think about the actual market demand. And it's true, those tonics, like people need a bigger quantity of them because they're taking, or some people are taking those like on an ongoing basis, whereas the more herbs that are used in acute situations, it's clear that they're going to be used less often, so the demand is going to be less. So that's a good point. And like I know now as well, you are focusing a little bit on the teaching side, but also like regenerative farming and gardening as well. So like I think this is a pretty interesting topic that people would want to know more about. So can you tell me a little bit about kind of how that all works, and like regenerative gardening and farming for herbalists?
Well, I think it evolved, especially like I said, with Michael's work as being a holistic, well, an organic apple orchardist in the beginning. He really was, there were a lot of organic practices that really weren't that wholesome for the land, like maybe using copper sprays and things like that. So he just kept learning and evolving and thinking, what did people do? Because in the beginning, the organic model was more, let's use a natural spray instead of this conventional chemical spray. So over time, not just him, but others have been trying to think back, well, how was it before the sprays, and how can we work within nature, and not even within nature, but how can we are a part of nature. So that idea of, I think, and then he did a lot of training with, or teachings about just the mycorrhiza and the web of life underneath the soil, and the soil, the health of the soil, of course, is life on the planet, really. So, and working and observing just the life cycles of the insects, and just really the observation is one of the main things in this type of uh, gardening or orcharding, and figuring out what you can do that makes the least, makes a healthy impact, but not a negative one. And so with this, like we're having a class coming up just called Co-Creating with the Plants and Spirit, and we're going to team up with Deb Soul from Avena Botanical and teach a class. And so part of the things will be just kind of seeing ourselves as part of the creation and nature, as we have the same elements in us as the land, and not a part of nature, but seeing ourselves working with the land, and using practices that emphasize a lot of biodiversity. And again, I think back of like when Michael first was an organic orchardist, they mowed every bit of the grass because they didn't want the bees to have to compete with and we brought bees in, and we didn't want them to compete with the dandelions. We want them to, but now he brings in all kinds of, we're always moving plants from my herb garden out into the orchard just to bring in more diversity, because what it does is it encourages a lot of the wild pollinators, and we don't bring in any domesticated bees right now. We have plenty of wild pollinators that do the work. So just that idea of working in harmony with the ecosystem, and doing less tilling, and maybe no tilling is the goal, but it's a big goal to do in the gardens and the fields, to just do as little, just keeping the web whole and that underneath the soil as much as possible. So we still put a lot of cover crops in for green manures, and then just working. Well, I like this idea of reciprocity, that we don't take more from the land than we give back. And then just this idea of also blending in not only what we're doing physically as far as composting and green manures and things like that, but also just this idea of a little bit of prayer and ceremony, and bringing in that aspect of the connection with the elements and the rest of our neighbors and critters that we live with. And so kind of a package deal, I guess, just weaving all that together.
Yeah,
It's
I
again
find
always
this.
evolving.
I find this so
Just evolving.
I
Yeah.
find this so interesting as far as like that whole model, and I really like the example that you shared about the bees for the orchard. So like in the beginning, you're trying to control everything, and so you cut the grass and you brought in the bees to pollinate it. But now you've kind of changed your strategy to like let nature bring in those natural pollinators. And I would love to know what kind of made you realize that maybe you should change and like stop cutting the grass. Like, what was it that start that change, and what were the results like? Like, can you tell the difference between your apples, or is the crops more or less? Like, what are those changes like from then and now?
I think it's almost changing from like a more holistic model like we have for our body, instead of treating the body like with the allopathic medicine, like you'd pay basically no attention until you're so sick that you have these horrible symptoms, and then you want to go to the conventional, not that all doctors, there's a place for all kinds of medicine. We're blessed to have all the modalities, but sometimes in conventional medicine, there's this idea that you have what I would think of as an imbalance, but they would think, oh, you have these symptoms, we're going to give you this allopathic medicine to get rid of that symptom. Kind of forgetting to look at the core or the root of the problem, which as an herbalist, we're always, from day one, you can treat the symptoms, that's going to give somebody some ease, but you want to go to the root of the problem. And certainly in Ayurveda, and the idea of, everything is like either a poison or a medicine, we always think what's the ideal. So thinking of that model, I do think that was partly what Michael started working with the orchard. And then we think of our healthy microbiome, and if we have a healthy microbiome in our body, with even though there's some bacterias in there, knowing that disease is out there in the wild plants, but some of them are thriving. Why are they thriving? And so really focusing on health versus combating the diseases that could come in. And I think that's really true for the gardening and farming too, that if you just focusing on really feeding and nurturing the soil, and then also even foliar sprays, Michael sprays on the in the orchard and in the gardens, and uses herbs in them to help just feed and nourish the plant. And then that makes them also more protective against disease and insects. And then, like you said, just cultivating and really making that ecosystem for the beneficial insects as well as the pollinators, as well as, there's some wasps that eat, some things that are problematic in the apples. And so just finding that nice balance really of what was more in harmony to begin with before humans came in and started wreaking a little havoc. But
yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it? Like, it's that we come in, we try to do well, but then often we're just like doing more harm than good in the end. And like, if we just let nature do its thing, sometimes it's the best thing we can do. It's yeah, but and there are like, because there's so many factors that like nature just naturally incorporates all of these different factors that come together in a natural way. And when we're starting to do it our way, that's that's when it gets interesting. Definitely. And so you do teach a class around this as well. Is that online or is it in person? How does that work?
I do some of each now. I was very slow to want to move into Zoom because I'm really a people person and a plant outside person. And even when you said you wanted to interview me today, I'm like, oh, it's winter, otherwise I'd definitely be talking to you from the garden, but I've kind of dragged my feet about it, but I have been doing some Zoom classes as well. And so now, as possibly the pandemic gets less, probably last year I had to cancel all my larger events, but this year I hope to run them and possibly also have a Zoom component so that maybe they're hybrid. So some of each.
Yeah, I think we all have to do what we have to do at the current times. It's a little bit interesting, but I mean, it's kind of there are some positives in like learning new systems and things like that. But I agree, I would probably rather be in the garden learning about gardening with you in person than on Zoom. But it's still we have to do what we have to do. And so I would like to kind of round up and pull in those pieces of what we've talked about today in terms of like, what are the most important pieces of advice that you would like to communicate to someone who is like either a new or they have a business already, but an herbalist who is looking to navigate their path forward as an herbalist? So what are your top pieces of advice that you would like to share?
Well, I think sometimes it might be a little different if they're primarily a grower or a practitioner. I guess I'll just maybe think of it as more of a practitioner. And then and that could be a community herbalist or a clinical herbalist, or just remembering that people are really they have their own innate wisdom and healing. So we are just helping and assisting and guiding, but they're really their own healer. And then I think also just remembering to not hesitate to say if you don't know something. And then being a good I think a community herbalist is a good networker. So I can listen and I can help and I can offer a few things, but hopefully I'm really working with the other practitioners in my community, and I can refer somebody to like, well, I really think you could benefit, a good networker there. And then let's see, I think those are just, I guess those three things are just networking and not being afraid to, think to say that you don't know something. Well, also, I guess there's this part of me that thinks sometimes we can let our own fear hold us back because we think we don't know enough. And so just learning to share what you do know, what you have worked with. If you know dandelion has really helped curb your cravings and giving you more energy and cleared up your skin, then you can share about that. Or if you know how to treat head lice with tea tree oil or whatever, you share that. And so you just share what you know and it's not only a blessing that is gifted to us from others and from books and resources and things, but I think then once we know it, it is also, many of my elders have passed on to me. It's not only just a blessing or gift that's come to us, it's then our, I don't really want to call it a duty because that sounds kind of, but it's almost like we need to pass this on too, because now we are the ones that are passing it on. And that's why we know about it, because of our elders and ancestors have passed them on, these things on to us. So maybe that helps you to get over the fear of like, maybe I don't, there's even as we get older, there's still this aspect of me that can be, oh, I don't know enough. Well, I don't know enough. But we just share what we know. And it's not only just a gift that we give, but it's also, there's a certain bit of responsibility to pass it on, because some people don't know a lot of these, just simple things. So.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice, because like it's something that so many of us struggle with, like just kind of having confidence in our own abilities. And yeah, sometimes we're just scared to get out there and try it. But when you think of that bigger picture, like you are passing on that ancient knowledge that and we're passing it on to other people who might not know what you kind of take as a given thing. Like this is that passing of knowledge and helping each other, that community aspect, which is so important. And yeah, that greater purpose, that's what it's all a part of. And when you think of it like that, it makes it like, yeah, I can do that. It's less scary, and I think it's a nice way of framing it. So thank you for sharing that. I did also want to mention, so like I have your book, this one here, and for people who are wanting to, like look at the different pathways. I think especially for people who are at the that creative beginning stage and trying to work out where to go. It's a great book to get started and see the possibilities or the different things. Like Nancy was saying at the beginning, there's the interviews of different pathways that people have taken, and it gives you some ideas. And I got that book when I was at the beginning of my herbal journey, and it really did inspire this conference. Like that, you can see that the pathways that I talk about in this conference and the different areas that I try to highlight, I try to interview people and the different things that came from that book. Like I sort of the growers, the makers, the healers, and the teachers and the sellers. Like there's different areas of herbs, but it's a really cool place to start for people who kind of don't know what they want to do as an herbalist yet. I would recommend that book to explore different options, I guess. But for people who want to know more about you and what you do at Heartsong Farm, how can they, where should they find you, Nancy?
Oh, yeah. So our website would be the best. It's heartsongfarmwellness.com. So heartsongfarmwellness.com. Yeah, we'd love to have people connect with us, and we have our books there and workshops coming up, and for growers and healers, and just I've never been one who likes to just do one thing. I like to do a lot of things, so that it's a variety of things that we're offering now. So